Speaker of the National Assembly, Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Deputy President of the Republic, David Dabete Mabuza, Ministers and Deputy Ministers, the leaders of political parties here present, as well as the Deputy President of the governing party, Paul Mashatile, honorable members. In the State of the Nation address last week, I said that a nation is defined by how its people meet the gravest difficulties, whether they work together and confront their challenges as one, united by a common purpose, or whether they surrender to the problems before them. The same can be said of their elected representatives. As we, the elected representatives of the people of our country, gathered here in this house, we have to ask ourselves whether we are able to work together to confront the challenges of our nation, united by a common purpose, or will we be consumed by our differences, and in doing so, surrender to the problems that beset our country. The debate on the State of the Nation address over the last 2 days has done much to emphasize our differences and to reveal the extent of political contestation in our society. In a way that is to be expected and even welcomed, in a vibrant and robust democracy like ours, we must expect such contestation. The debate has raised important issues, and some constructive suggestions have also been put forward. But there are those in this House who, instead of being what I would call merchants of hope, have cast themselves as merchants of despair. They have determined that their political fortunes are best served by depicting our country, South Africa, as being in chaos, instead of being parties that acknowledge the challenges and that are determined to work together with all of us to find solutions. Rather than present a balanced assessment of the state of the nation, they have instead resorted to dishonest and self-serving rhetoric. Rather than acknowledge the grave damage caused to our country by what has ensued in the past, such as state capture, by the effects of a devastating global pandemic, and by the worst public violence in the history of our democracy, some of these honorable members have failed to come up with practical suggestions or solutions that can resolve the many problems that our country faces today. Some chose to belittle and even to deride what has been achieved over the last 5 years in the midst of extremely difficult conditions, because it does not serve their political interests to recognize the progress that has been made and progress that is plainly clear to everyone who cares to look. The contributions that they have made may serve their electoral aspirations, but they do not serve the interests of the people of South Africa. The task we have as elected representatives, as I said, is to emerge from this debate with a common determination to meet the challenges of the present, but also to renew the promise contained in our Constitution of a better life for all. Where people began to doubt the promise of our Constitution, it is our job to restore their faith in our Constitution, not through words, but through action. To do so, we must reflect deeply and honestly on what has gone wrong, on where we have strayed from the path we set out in the first place. As the Honorable Prince Buthelezi rightly said in his remarks, which were delivered by the Honorable Singh, what South Africans want is honesty, fairness, justice, and to know that their government is capable and willing to do its job. At the same time, we must reflect on the progress that we have made, and real progress. And we must concentrate on the actions that we need to take now to overcome the challenges that face us. Nobody can deny the distance we have come over the past 5 years, nor can anyone deny that our country has been struck by successive crises that have severely impeded our efforts to improve the lives of our people as we would have wanted to. We inherited a state hollowed out by corruption and malfeasance and an economy in steep decline. Since then, we have rebuilt the capability and restored the independence of institutions that are essential in our democracy, institutions that had been weakened. We have reinvigorated entities like the South African Revenue Service, the National Prosecuting Authority, the Special Investigating Unit, to fulfill their mandates effectively without fear or favor. That we have done. The tireless work of the State Capture Commission and the Investigating Directorate is now bearing fruit in the prosecution of those alleged to have been involved and responsible for state capture. We faced up to the worst global pandemic in a century and marshaled an unprecedented response to save lives and to protect livelihoods. We implemented a new social grant which has reached more than 11 million people. We supported over 5 million workers who would otherwise have lost their jobs and provided tax relief and direct support to thousands of businesses and helped them to survive. Indeed, Honorable Masango, South Africans need hand-ups and not hand-outs. That is why our unprecedented expansion of public employment programs has proven to be a great success, and they've also proven to be an effective tool for mitigating unemployment when not enough jobs are being created by the economy. The presidential employment stimulus has created work and livelihood opportunities for 1 million people to date, most of whom are young people. We have implemented far-reaching economic reforms to restore confidence in our economy, and that is why investors are looking at our country with great interest and many of them investing. We've opened the way for private investment in electricity generation, for the first time and release spectrum to harness the potential of the digital era. For a province like the Northern Cape to have attracted 100 billion rand in investment in just a matter of 3 years must mean that something is cooking and happening. We have successfully mobilized new investments in factories, production lines, call centers, and the Western Cape is teeming with a lot of call centers that are being set up here. It's largely because of the work that is being done by the national government, whether you like it or not. Farms and mines are being invested in across the country. These have created jobs and opportunities, including for small business. Special economic zones in Gauteng have been set up because international companies have seen that we really mean business, and we are indeed embarking and implementing the reforms that we promised we would make. This represents real progress to rebuild our country and to recover from what we lost. Despite this progress, however, we face steep challenges. South Africans are worn down by power outages, water supply interruptions, rising crime, and instability in local government. That, we admit, several speakers in the debate raised the need for effective and urgent implementation of the tasks outlined in the State of the Nation address to address these challenges decisively over the next year. Now, the ANC is not the only party that is in government, in various entities, government structures. And one of the speakers here stood up and said, just be careful that as you throw stones, do remember that you also live in a glass house, because the same could be happening to your side as well. And we do not need to go through a litany of the various failures that we are experiencing at local government level. And this affects all parties that are also in government in various centers. The important thing, though, is for us to realize that we have a common problem and we've got to find common solutions rather than to stand here and throw stones. Foremost amongst the actions that are needed for the resolution of our challenges clearly is the electricity crisis. As we said during our address last week, we do not need another plan. We need to accelerate the implementation of the plan that we have already put to the nation in July last year. We have already taken a number of important steps to reduce the severity and frequency of load shedding. The measures which the Minister of Finance will announce in a week's time in his budget will boost the rollout of rooftop solar by business and households. To end load shedding, however, we must shift gear. A crisis of this nature demands a coordinated response, and it demands urgent action. That is the reason why I'm appointing a minister in the presidency, and the reason why a national state of disaster has been declared. As I said last week, cheers. Now, focused attention requires us to do a whole number of things. And as I said last week, this new minister will assume responsibility for overseeing the various aspects of the electricity crisis response. The minister will be responsible for driving the various actions being coordinated by the National Energy Crisis Committee to end load shedding as a matter of urgency. The reality is that the resolution of the energy crisis requires effective coordination across several departments and public entities. It requires the undivided attention of a political principal who does not need to split their time, their energies amongst different important responsibilities. This appointment will ensure that there is a minister who is ultimately responsible for resolving load shedding and who is able to work with all fellow cabinet ministers, departments, and entities also. Some have suggested that the appointment of the minister will cause confusion and fragmentation, and that it might also result in turf wars amongst the ministers who deal with energy and ESCOM. That is not the case. This minister will be focused day in and day out only on addressing the load shedding crisis, working together with the management as well as the board of ESCOM. The minister will be leading the National Energy Crisis Committee and interacting with all other departments in a spirit of cooperation or cooperative governance. The Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy deals with matters of energy policy as well as mineral resources. Beyond the energy crisis that we face, the restructuring of government will be effected to enable entities that fall under various departments to be properly located in those departments. And the Minister of Public Enterprises is executing the recommendations of the Presidential Review Commission as well as the State-Owned Enterprise Council that I appointed in relation to the ownership and governance of state-owned enterprises. That function should be completed in time as we continue with the restructuring of government. The Minister of Public Enterprises will therefore continue to work on the restructuring of ESCOM as well as other state-owned enterprises until then, with the focus that the Minister of Electricity will have on load shedding and the work that is being done by ESCOM and the board. I do believe that we stand a much better chance to address this overriding challenge and crisis that our country faces. And through this effort, we should be able to bring load shedding to an end. As Minister Mantashe said, urgency of execution and delivery is paramount. We don't have the luxury of time. Now, several speakers in this debate have argued that the national state of disaster is unnecessary or that it will allow for abuse of the system, and some have even suggested that it will allow for the abuse of financial resources. This includes some leaders in this very House in the opposition, such as the Premier of the Western Cape, who as recently as last month was writing me a letter and holding media briefings calling for a state of disaster to be declared. Now, the Honorable Brink yesterday called the Disaster Management Act a dangerous weapon in the hands of incompetent ministers. This is the same Disaster Management Act that made it possible for us to take decisive, effective, and agile responses to deal with COVID-19. It was this act that empowered us during that pandemic to save many lives and prevent even greater hardships. It is this Disaster Management Act that we have on our statute books that has on numerous occasions enabled us to provide urgent relief and support to people affected by floods and other natural disasters. The state of disaster that was declared last week will be used to mitigate the social and economic effects of load shedding and accelerate the measures that are necessary to close the shortfall in electricity and nothing else. As I said in the State of the Nation address, we will ensure that environmental protections and technical standards are maintained and that procurement is undertaken, yes, with transparency and proper oversight. We will use the state of disaster to rid of unnecessary bureaucratic obstacles that stand in the way of urgently bringing new generation capacity onto the grid. And we will use it to ensure continuity in the provision of critical services and supply chains and to address the impact of load shedding on businesses and on households. As we build on an electricity system that will meet our energy requirements into the future, we need to dispel some of the myths that have been circulating and that have been repeated even here about the path that we are taking. We need to dispel this idea that we are abandoning coal as a fuel source. We should all remember that coal-fired power stations provide 80% of our energy source right now and will therefore continue to provide the bulk of our base load supply into the future. Even as people in international forums have asked me, I've said we've just built 2 mega power stations, Kusile and Medupi, that generate some 8,000 megawatts at great cost. And there's just no way that we are going to shut those 2 power stations down. There's just no way that we are going to do that. And I've told them that, insisting that we are, however, committed to a future energy mix that consists of a diversity of energy sources, including coal, renewables, nuclear, gas, hydro, battery storage, biomass, and other forms of energy. We must dispel the idea that unbundling of ESCOM into 3 separate entities is out of step with the international trends. The reality is that over 100 countries, including China, Germany, and Russia, have established independent transmission and system operation companies. We need to dispel the claim that creating a more competitive, efficient, and sustainable electricity generation market threatens the ability of the state to provide affordable electricity to its citizens. In fact, it enhances it. On the contrary, the reforms we are undertaking will improve the ability of the state to provide power to the people now and into the future. And the power we want to be able to provide to our people is affordable power. Our priorities in 2023 are to decisively resolve the electricity crisis, to reduce unemployment, and to root out corruption and crime. Yet, as we confront the most immediate and pressing challenges facing our country, we must also plant the seeds for future growth. We must ask ourselves not only where are we as a country, but what kind of a country we want to be. We need to undertake other essential work now so that we can build beyond the crisis and, yes, lay the foundation for a better future for all South Africans. As a country with a young population, we have enormous potential for growth and development. The most effective way to harness that potential is through ensuring equal access to quality education. In the State of the Nation address, we outlined some of the work underway to improve access to quality early childhood development. This is being supported by progress in basic education, where schools in poorer areas are showing improved performance, and thanks to greater government support. We are developing vocational education and training opportunities and implementing new ways to fund workplace training programs so that we develop the skills that the economy needs. And through the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention, we are creating opportunities for young people to more easily access opportunities for employment, for training, for entrepreneurship, and work experience. By the same measure, access to quality health care, and indeed better health itself, are necessary to improve our people's lives and build a successful society and a more productive economy. We are committed to the provision of quality health care for all, regardless of their ability to pay. We will therefore progressively implement the National Health Insurance, the NHI, as soon as necessary. As soon as the necessary legislation is approved by this Parliament. In the meantime, we are preparing